She looked at me and said coldly, "I don't cook for you. I only cook for my kids. You're a grown man, figure it out." I said nothing, but weeks later, when the divorce papers arrived, her cry of, "You're ending this over dinner," was louder than any meal she ever made. It was a Tuesday, I think. The days kind of blend together when you're just grinding away. I remember getting home around 7, long day at work, the kind that leaves a buzzing in your bones. All I wanted was a quiet evening at home. The house was mine, bought and paid for years before I met my wife, Sarah. When she and her 2 kids, a boy and a girl, moved in after we got married 5 years ago, it became our house. Or so I thought. The smell of roasted chicken was in the air, and for a second, my shoulders relaxed. A simple, decent meal. I walked into the kitchen, and the scene was pretty standard. Sarah was at the counter scrolling on her phone. Her kids, Jake, who's 16, and Emily, who's 14, were at the table, plates piled high with chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. They were laughing at some video on a phone. It looked like a nice family dinner. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. "Hey everyone, smells great, honey." Sarah didn't look up from her phone. "Hey." The kids mumbled a greeting. I went to the cabinet to get a plate. As I reached for the serving platter on the stove to get some chicken, Sarah's voice cut through the air. It wasn't angry. It was just flat, cold. "There's not enough for you." I stopped. I looked at the platter. There was at least half a chicken left. Plenty of potatoes and beans too. I must have misheard. "Sorry, what was that?" This time she looked up, her expression unreadable. "I didn't make enough for you. I made dinner for me and the kids." I was confused. This had never happened before. "Okay, well, there looks like there's plenty left. I'm happy with a smaller piece." Then she said the words. The words that changed everything. She looked right at me, no emotion in her face, and said, "I don't cook for you, Mark. I only cook for my kids. You're a grown man, you can figure it out." And then she looked back down at her phone. Silence. The kids stopped laughing and were now staring at their plates, pretending they hadn't heard. The air in the room went from warm and smelling of chicken to an Arctic freeze. Figure it out. I stood there for a good 10 seconds, the plate heavy in my hand. My mind was weirdly quiet. There was no flash of anger, no big emotional surge. It was like her words were a key turning a lock I didn't even know was there. A final, definitive click. I looked at the scene. My wife, on her phone. Her kids, eating a meal in my house at my table. And me, the grown man, being told to figure out my own dinner. The provider of the entire scene. The mortgage, the utilities, the car she drove, the food in the fridge she used to cook for her family, was now officially just the guy who funded it all. An outsider. A wallet with legs. I didn't say a word. I put the plate back in the cabinet, the motion slow and deliberate. I walked to the fridge, took out the leftover pizza from the weekend, and put a slice in the microwave. I ate it standing at the counter, scrolling through the news on my phone. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. No one spoke. When I was done, I rinsed my plate, put it in the dishwasher, and went to my home office. I closed the door. That was the moment our marriage ended. She just didn't know it yet. For the next 3 weeks, I figured it out. I didn't make a scene. I didn't argue or demand an apology. That would have been pointless. She had shown me my exact position in the household. Arguing would be like a landlord arguing with his tenants about why they don't invite him to their parties. So, I adapted. I started doing my own grocery shopping on the way home from work, just enough for me for a few days. I bought a small grill for the patio and started making my own dinners out there. Steak, burgers, chicken. I'd eat on the patio, reading a book. I stopped contributing to the family grocery fund. I kept the house bills paid, of course. The lights stayed on. But the river of cash that flowed into her personal account for household expenses, which really meant clothes for her and the kids, lunches out, and whatever else she wanted, it dried up. I just stopped the automatic transfer. She noticed, of course. About a week in, she came to me, annoyed. "The grocery card was declined, and you didn't put any money in my account this week." I looked up from my laptop. "I'm figuring it out, like you said. I'm handling my own food now, so I adjusted the budget accordingly." "Mark, that's not funny. The kids need things." "The kids are always welcome to the food I buy for myself," I said calmly. "And if you need money for groceries for you and them, you can use the debit card for the joint account we have." That account was one I hadn't used in years, and it had maybe a few $100s in it. It was technically our money, but it was a pittance compared to what she was used to. She stared at me, baffled. She thought I was being petty, punishing her over the dinner thing. She couldn't see the bigger picture. She couldn't see that I had simply accepted the new rules she had laid out. She had drawn a line in the sand, separating herself and her kids from me. I was just making that line official. While she was fuming over the grocery budget, I was making other moves, quietly. I met with a divorce lawyer, one of the best in the city. I laid out the whole situation, the prenuptial agreement we'd signed, which clearly stated the house and my primary investments were my sole property. The 5 years of bank statements showing me as the sole provider for the household. I told him about the dinner incident. He just nodded, a grim little smile on his face. He said it was the clearest example of a marital breakdown he'd heard in a long time. He drew up the papers. They were delivered to the house by a process server last Friday afternoon. I made sure I was home. I was on the patio, grilling a steak. The server handed her the envelope. She opened it, right there in the living room. Her face went from confusion to disbelief to white-hot rage. She stormed out onto the patio, waving the papers in her hand. "What is this? What the hell is this, Mark?" I calmly flipped my steak. "It's a petition for divorce, Sarah." Her voice rose to a shriek, the sound echoing in the quiet backyard. "A divorce? You're ending our marriage? Over dinner? Are you serious? You're throwing away 5 years over one stupid meal?" I finally looked at her, my expression as calm as I felt. "No, Sarah. I'm not ending this over dinner. I'm ending it over the realization that I'm not your husband. I'm your landlord. I'm your banker. I was just the guy you lived with who paid for everything while you raised your family. You said it yourself. You cook for your kids, not for me. Well, now you can figure out how to provide for your kids too." The look on her face, it was pure shock. The entitled fury was replaced by a flash of genuine panic. For the first time, I think she understood. It was never about the chicken. It was about everything. And she had just figured that out, far too late. Update 1. It's been a week since the papers were served. To say things have been tense in this house would be like saying the ocean is a little damp. Thanks for the comments and support. It helps to know I'm not crazy for seeing the dinner thing as the final straw. After her initial shock on the patio, Sarah's panic quickly morphed back into her default setting. Righteous indignation. She spent the entire weekend either locked in her room making furious phone calls or stomping around the house, alternating between crying and glaring at me. The kids have been mostly invisible, hiding out in their rooms. I can't blame them. Her first move was to call her mother, Brenda. Brenda then called me, ready for battle. I answered, knowing it was coming. "Mark, I have just heard the most ridiculous thing. Sarah is beside herself. You're divorcing her because she didn't make you a plate of chicken? Have you lost your mind?" I kept my voice calm and even. "Brenda, with all due respect, this isn't about a plate of chicken. It's about being told that I am not considered part of the family that I am providing for." It was a symptom of a much larger problem. She was tired. She has 2 children to look after. "Sometimes a man needs to be a grown-up and make himself a sandwich," she screeched. "I agree," I said, "and I am now being a grown-up and handling my own affairs permanently. Sarah's lawyer can speak to my lawyer going forward." I gave her my lawyer's name and number and then politely ended the call. Next came the attempt to weaponize the kids. On Monday, Sarah came to me with a new tactic. Her eyes were red, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Mark, we need to think about the children. This is going to be so hard on them. They're going to be uprooted from their home, their school. Is that really fair to them, all because of your pride?" I looked at her. "I have thought about the children, Sarah, and I will ensure they are not left destitute. But this house is my premarital asset, as our prenup clearly states. It is not, and was never going to be, their inheritance from me. Where they live will be up to you and your ability to provide for them, something you seem to have forgotten how to do." The mention of the prenup made her face tighten. I don't think she ever took it seriously. She probably thought it was just a piece of paper that wouldn't hold up. The financial pressure is starting to work as intended. She has hired her own lawyer, a real shark from what I can tell. My lawyer got the first official letter yesterday. The demands are, frankly, insane. She's demanding exclusive use of the marital home, a ridiculous amount in spousal support, and the real kicker, she wants me to pay child support for Jake and Emily. Her lawyer is trying to argue that because I have acted as a father figure for 5 years, I have an implied duty of care. My lawyer just laughed when he read that part. He said it's a classic overreach, designed to scare me into a bigger settlement. We sent back a very simple, very firm response. It reiterated the terms of the prenup. It stated that the house is non-negotiable. It offered a fair, time-limited alimony to help her get back on her feet, but nothing close to what she wants. And it flatly rejected any financial responsibility for children who are not legally mine and whose biological father is, to my knowledge, still alive and well. The most telling event happened 2 days ago. I came home from work, and the house was filled with the smell of my favorite meal, lasagna. Sarah had made a huge pan of it. She greeted me at the door with a smile, the first real one I'd seen in years. "I made dinner," she said softly, "for all of us." I looked at her, then at the table, which was set for 4 for the first time in a month. It was a performance, a desperate, transparent attempt to turn back the clock, to pretend the last month hadn't happened. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice polite but distant. "But I've already made plans." I walked past her, went to my office, and a few minutes later left to go to a local pub for a burger and a beer. I could feel her eyes burning into my back as I walked out the door. She's not sorry. She's scared. She didn't miss me, her husband. She misses my wallet. She misses the security. She misses the easy life where she could have a family unit that I was required to fund but was not allowed to be a part of. The smell of lasagna didn't smell like an apology. It smelled like desperation. And it changes nothing. Update 2. It's been a month now. The atmosphere in the house has gone from tense to surreal. We are essentially 2 separate people living in the same building, communicating only through terse text messages or, more often, through our lawyers. Sarah's initial legal strategy of demand everything and see what sticks has slammed head-on into the brick wall of our prenuptial agreement. Her lawyer is good, but even a good lawyer can't change the words written on a signed and notarized document. The house is mine. My major investments are mine. Her claim for child support was dismissed in the first preliminary hearing. The judge basically laughed it out of the courtroom, which I'm told left her lawyer fuming and Sarah in tears. Now that the shock and awe campaign has failed, she's moved on to the next phase, a war of attrition and dirty tricks. A couple of weeks ago, I started noticing strange charges on a joint credit card we had kept for emergencies. It had a 0 balance for years. Suddenly, there were charges for a high-end spa day, a new designer handbag, expensive dinners out with her friends. She was trying to run up marital debt, thinking that I would be on the hook for half of it in the divorce. I immediately called the credit card company, froze the account, and reported the card as stolen, since she was no longer authorized to use it for non-emergency purposes, especially post-separation. I sent the statement to my lawyer, who filed a motion to have all debts incurred by her after the date of our separation assigned solely to her. Another loophole closed. Her next move was more personal. She tried to turn the kids against me. I overheard her on the phone with Jake, her son. She was crying, telling him that I was trying to kick them out onto the street, and that I didn't care what happened to them. She was painting me as the villain, the cruel stepfather who was abandoning them in their time of need. To my surprise, it didn't seem to work as well as she'd hoped. Jake is 16. He's not a little kid. I think he's more aware of the situation than she gives him credit for. The next day, he actually knocked on my office door. It was the first time he'd initiated a conversation with me in weeks. "Hey, Mark," he said, looking awkward. "Mom's really upset." "I know, Jake. I'm sorry you and Emily are in the middle of this." He shuffled his feet. "She said you're making us leave. Your mom and I are getting a divorce," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "This is my house. So yes, eventually she and you and Emily will have to move. But I'm not throwing you out on the street. Your mom will be getting a settlement that will help her get a new place." He just nodded. "Okay. It's just, that night, with the dinner thing, we heard what she said. It was messed up. That one sentence was more validating than anything my lawyer could have told me. The kids saw it. They heard it. They knew. The biggest move, however, came last week. My lawyer called me. "Mark, you need to see this. Sarah has filed a motion for an emergency hearing. She's accusing you of emotional abuse and is seeking a restraining order to have you removed from the house." My blood ran cold. This was a new level. The motion was filled with lies and exaggerations. It painted my quiet detachment after the dinner incident as a form of silent treatment and psychological warfare. It claimed my control over the finances was a tool of abuse. She was trying to get me kicked out of my own home. We went to court yesterday. Sarah got on the stand and gave a tearful, Oscar-worthy performance about how intimidated and scared she was of me. It was nauseating. When it was my lawyer's turn, he didn't attack her. He just presented facts. He showed the prenup. He showed the bank statements. Then he brought up the dinner incident. "Mrs. Miller," he said calmly, "could you please recount for the court the conversation you had with your husband on the evening of July 16th regarding the evening meal?" She immediately got defensive. "It was nothing. It was a stupid argument over chicken." "That's not what I asked," my lawyer pressed. "Could you tell the court what you said to him?" She stammered, trying to evade the question. The judge, looking impatient, finally said, "Answer the question, Mrs. Miller." She finally mumbled it, her voice barely a whisper. "I told him I didn't cook for him, only for my kids, and that he should figure it out." My lawyer let the words hang in the air. "You told the man who pays the mortgage on the house you live in, the utilities, the car you drive, and the groceries you buy, that he was not included in your family meal. And now you are claiming that his reaction to that statement, his decision to, as you put it, figure it out for himself, is a form of abuse that makes you fear for your safety." The judge looked at Sarah, then at her lawyer, then back at Sarah. He dismissed her motion on the spot. He called it a transparent and frivolous attempt to manipulate the legal system. He also warned her that if she brought another motion like it, he would consider sanctions against her and her attorney. We walked out of the courthouse, and I felt like I could breathe again. She had thrown her biggest punch, and it hadn't just missed, it had backfired spectacularly. The war isn't over, but I feel like the tide has definitively turned. She's not fighting for a fair settlement anymore. She's fighting against the inevitable consequences of her own actions. Final update. It's been 6 months since I ate that lonely slice of microwave pizza at my kitchen counter. As of last week, the divorce is final. The war of attrition is over. After her disastrous attempt to get a restraining order, Sarah's fight just seemed to fizzle out. Her lawyer, probably realizing he was fighting a losing battle and not wanting to face sanctions from the judge, advised her to accept our settlement offer. It was the same offer we'd made from the beginning. A fair division of the assets accumulated during our 5-year marriage, and 12 months of rehabilitative alimony to help her get back on her feet and find a full-time job. It was more than fair, but it was a world away from the lifetime of comfort she had been demanding. The last few weeks of her living in the house were strange. All the fight was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful silence. She hired movers, and over the course of a weekend, moved her and the kids' belongings out of my house. I stayed out of the way, but I was there when she walked out for the last time. She didn't look at me. She just closed the door behind her, and that was it. The silence she left behind was the most peaceful sound I've ever heard. So what happened to her? I've heard through the grapevine that reality has been a very harsh wake-up call. The settlement money, which probably seemed like a lot on paper, is being eaten up quickly by the cost of living in this city. She had to rent a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town. No more big backyard, no more granite countertops, no more walk-in closets. She also had to get a full-time job for the first time in over a decade. She's working as a receptionist at a dental office. From what I hear, she complains about it constantly. She complains about her small apartment, about having to budget, about how tired she is after working all day. She's furious that her easy life is gone. The most interesting part is what happened with the kids. A few weeks ago, Jake, her son, called me. He's starting to look at colleges and he wanted my advice on a few things. We had a good talk, and at the end of it, he said something that floored me. You know, Mom is miserable. She yells a lot. She keeps saying that you ruined her life. He paused, but you didn't. She did. I get that now. That meant more to me than winning any court battle. As for me, life is good. I've reclaimed my house. It feels like my space again. I've been working on projects I'd put off, reconnecting with friends, and just enjoying the quiet. The whole ordeal cost me a lot of money and a lot of stress. But what I gained back was my self-respect. The revenge, in the end, wasn't some grand, elaborate scheme. It was just letting the consequences of her actions play out. Her entire worldview was built on the assumption that my role was to provide for her and her kids, no questions asked, and that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection she threw my way. She saw me as a utility, not a partner. The moment she said, "You're a grown man, figure it out," she thought she was putting me in my place, but she was really just giving me my freedom. She told me to figure it out, so I did. I figured out that I was better off alone. I figured out how to protect myself legally. I figured out how to move on. And she? Now she's the one who has to figure it out. How to pay the rent, how to manage a budget, how to build a life without a safety net she took for granted and disrespected. Her cry of "You're ending this over dinner" showed that she never understood what she had until it was gone. She didn't just lose a husband, she lost a lifestyle she thought was her right. And that, I have to admit, is a very satisfying resolution. Thanks for listening, Reddit.